Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, January the 20th, 2026. Today, or perhaps yesterday, the Sun moves into Aquarius, and so does Mercury. And so this really tells us that the Aquarius season has started. We did have a load of planets in Capricorn. These Capricorn planets are moving into Aquarius, and so that creates a big change. And I think we need to really think about, what Aquarius is all about, especially as Pluto is in Aquarius. And I've titled this thumbnail "Brutal Freedom," and as I will sort of explain later in the video, I think the concept of freedom, the concepts of freedom and brutality are perhaps important to understanding what the sign Aquarius is all about. I also want to talk about Trump and Greenland. This is always a difficult area, talking about Trump, and I don't know. I know that there are strong feelings about Greenland. Everyone I've talked to seems to think that Trump is completely crazy to want to take over Greenland. But if you actually look at it astrologically, and you look at what was happening in 1946, the year Trump was born, then it kind of makes sense. And as an astrologer, it's not my job to moralize or to say, well, this is bad, this is good. You have to think about, where is the universe going? And I just get this strong feeling that it is absolutely right for the United States to take Greenland. But you must understand why I'm saying it. I'm not saying it because it's a good thing, because it's nice for Greenlanders, it's nice to the world, whatever. It is perhaps part of Trump and America's destiny. Whether or not that's a good thing, well, that is kind of bourgeois morality. We have to think about, the flow of history, and that's what we have to do as astrologers. We have to look at this flow of history. And I think that if you actually look at what's going on and what was going on in 1946, then I think that there is an argument that it is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do because that is what the universe wants to happen. And so, you have to understand what we mean by morality. Morality is not something short term. It's not something human. It's kind of what the universe wants. But before I look at Aquarius and Greenland and Trump, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, January the 20th, 2026. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time. And if you look at this chart, you will see that already there are a load of planets in Aquarius. Moon is now in late Aquarius, so it's been quite a time since the moon went into Aquarius. In fact, moon is almost getting ready to go into Pisces. So we've just got Mars left in Capricorn. So Capricorn season is just pretty much over. Now, as far as the Sun is concerned, now the Sun goes into Aquarius today at 1:45 London time, 1:45 a.m. London time. So that means that if you're in the Americas, the Sun went into Aquarius late on Monday. So that's one of the reasons in the thumbnail I've said it's 19th/20th. It's 19th, 20th. This is the time that the Sun moves into Aquarius, and we also have Mercury moving into Aquarius. So later in the day, late morning in the United States. In fact, Mercury goes into Aquarius. So we've got these two important sign changes, and it just really is a big change, moving from Capricorn to Aquarius. And it's still about a Saturn ruled sign. Saturn rules Capricorn, Saturn rules Aquarius, but it's two aspects of Saturn. And I'll be going into the details of that later in the video, but by and large, Aquarius, is a positive sign. It's an air sign. And so it is the positive side of Saturn. It's perhaps the Saturn that wants to take initiatives, but also has an idea about the way things should be organized, the way things should be run. It doesn't just want stability. It doesn't just want some sense of control. It wants active control. It wants active stability. It wants to do things to make people obey, perhaps. And that perhaps is why the sign Aquarius can be associated with totalitarianism. Sure, you can associate Aquarius with freedom and the desire for freedom, but the two kind of walk hand in hand, and people that start off wanting freedom can, end up being the ones who are in control, want to be in control, and are the ones who want to keep a tight lid on society through whatever means are available. Now, it's not just the fact that we've got a load of planets in Aquarius, which of course I will be talking about over the course of this video. We have Mars making a trine to Uranus, Mars making a sextile to Saturn. So Mars at 2755 Capricorn, making a trine to Uranus. That is quite a heavy duty aspect. I mean, I know it's a trine, but Saturn and Uranus as a pair are difficult. I was talking about this yesterday, because yesterday, Monday, we still had this trine between Saturn and Uranus, and it can be quite violent. It can be explosive. It can be about things going wrong. It can also be about things malfunctioning. And additionally, like yesterday, we have Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And so Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, Saturn sextile Mars, Saturn sextile Uranus, that can suggest that bad things happen. Things don't just go wrong. They could really blow up in our faces, if we're not careful. But this aspect is kind of more about society than individuals. I think if we're working at things on an individual level, we have choices. We can make decisions not to do things that are dangerous. If we are politicians, if we are Donald Trump, we perhaps don't have choices. The higher up we are in the hierarchy, the more power we have, the less control we have. Because if we are really powerful, we just become instruments of the universe, and that's all we are. Certainly, that is the case with Donald Trump. And so that is an important aspect. Mars trine Uranus. Yesterday I did a video on Saturn sextile Uranus. Saturn is still exactly sextile Uranus. So Saturn, Uranus, Mars, they're all coming together, and so it does make for quite a powerful day. And we've got Venus conjunct Pluto, Venus in Aquarius conjunct Pluto. Well, that's quite intense. It's about wanting control, wanting power, and perhaps not being prepared to compromise if we have the control, if we have the power. And that might, for example, say something about the international situation. And it used to be all about Ukraine. Now it's all about Greenland, and Greenland is causing a sort of breakdown in relations between the US and Europe. And Venus conjunct Pluto is very much with us with this aspect. That might say something about how diplomacy is carried out. It also says something about us, how we get on with each other, who's in control. That's something we might be thinking about. But on a positive note, with Venus conjunct Pluto, perhaps we can do something that is striking. Venus is a planet connected with art and creativity. So if we want to be creative, maybe we can do something that really is spectacular, but it's got to be intense. There's nothing trivial about that conjunction between Venus and Pluto. So overall, geocentrically, you can see that today, really, there's a lot going on. It's a very busy day. Now, turning to the picture for Sydney, Australia. So if we set this chart to a chart for noon in Sydney as a representative of Australasia, the moon is it's still in Aquarius, but earlier in Aquarius. The Sun has not quite moved into Capricorn, so the moon will, so the Sun will move, sorry, let's say it again. The Sun has not quite moved into Aquarius. So if you are in East Asia, Australia, or New Zealand, then the Sun won't move into Aquarius until, I don't know, maybe lunchtime, late morning, depends exactly where you are. If you're in New Zealand, it probably won't be till early afternoon today that the Sun moves into Aquarius, but it's getting there. And Mercury, as far as that's movement into Aquarius, if that's moving into Aquarius, well, Mercury won't move into Aquarius until tomorrow. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, there's not quite that focus on Aquarius, but by tomorrow, by Wednesday, the Sun and Mercury will both be in Aquarius. So there's not a huge amount of difference there between Australia and the United States. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Earth at the center of the solar system. So here's the heliocentric chart. Sorry, did I say that? I said putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. That's helio, sun. So yeah, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. And you can see that the Earth is now in Leo, because heliocentrically, the Earth is always opposite the Sun. So the Sun has just gone into Aquarius. That means the Earth has just gone into Leo. And the Earth in Leo is starting to make an opposition to Pluto, starting to make an opposition to Venus. I mean, very slowly. I mean, the Earth opposition Pluto, it's the same as Sun conjunct Pluto. It's an issue about power, who is in control. The Earth is also making a trine to Neptune, trine to Saturn. So trine to Neptune, well, there could be something sort of otherworldly going on here. We're not just focusing on the material, and with Earth trine Neptune, maybe we need some perspective here, maybe some spiritual perspective that we're not getting if we spend all our time just at ground level. We're thinking about our everyday material dramas, and we're looking about what's going on geopolitically. But Earth trine Neptune is maybe asking us to look at things in a different way. And also Mercury is still making a heliocentric conjunction to Mars. I mean, it is slightly sort of moving away, but Mercury's conjunct Mars is still a lot to say, and Mercury is about to move into Aquarius, and when Mercury moves into Aquarius, it will make an opposition to the Earth, and it will make a conjunction to Pluto, and that's more of the same. It's more of the same in the sense that we know that already. We kind of know that that's the kind of world we're living in. So now I want to look at things from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, January the 20th, 2026. Aries. Things are continuing to evolve. They're evolving in maybe quite a positive way. I mean, you're thinking about all of the possibilities in front of you, and the world is certainly becoming more exciting. And as an Aries, you want different things to do. You are looking for variety, and you're looking for stimulation, and I think that you can certainly find it as far as other people are concerned. You don't have to do things on your own, and if you can spend time talking to people, engaging with friends and associates, seeing what other people have to say. And it's not just about your own ambitions and what you're trying to achieve in the short term. You have to think about things in a different way, and thinking about society and what's happening. I mean, that's something that I think you should do. There's no harm in engaging with wider problems that go beyond your own here and now. But you don't want to take things too far. Mars is your ruler. Mars is still in Capricorn. Okay, Mars does go into Aquarius very soon, but make the most of Mars in Capricorn over the next few days. I think Mars moves into Aquarius on Friday, and Mars in Capricorn is making a trine to Saturn, trine to Uranus, and it's also making a sextile to Saturn. So those two aspects are important. Now, I said at the beginning of this piece that you should try to enjoy yourself, try to engage with other people. Don't forget your social life. Other people have got a lot to contribute, but at the same time, don't forget what is important to you. And with Mars trine Uranus, in a positive sense, you have the capacity to make things happen, and you can make things happen in such a way that it can benefit you. It can make things better for you. So with Mars trine Uranus, see what you can do, and if you feel that something needs to be done, then go and do it. And you can do it in a way that is reasonable and grounded up to a point. You are not going to forget your priorities today, and you have clear priorities, and you're able to decide what is your most important priority, your number one priority. And I think still your number one priority is yourself and your ambitions, whatever those ambitions might be. And with Mars trine Uranus, you just might have the possibility to actually make things happen. And it could be that by doing something that no one expects, you can seize the advantage. And in this light, your words and your actions are going to be very powerful. Yeah, they could also be disruptive. And so, Aries, you perhaps have to decide how far you want to take things. I mean, you could take things too far. We talk about Mars trine Uranus, and Uranus can be quite a dangerous influence. It can be associated with accidents and mishaps. And when you think about a trine, you think about things happening easily, perhaps too easily. So under normal circumstances, it might take several points of failure for a disaster to happen, but perhaps those points of failure might not exist because there's a trine. So don't use more energy than you have to, and that includes physical energy. And if you're working with a material object, you physically can push this object, but you could push it too far and create a situation where you're no longer in control. So take it easily. You don't have to be in a hurry because things are moving pretty quickly anyway. And if you try to make them go even faster, then that might create a situation where things do get out of control. So a bit of discipline might be in order. And I think that you can show discipline. Mars is not just trine Uranus, it's also trine Saturn, sextile Saturn. And Mars sextile Saturn perhaps gives you the opportunity to organize yourself and perhaps even to restrict yourself. You see what you can do, you know what you can do, but you have to do everything? No, you don't. You may even feel that you have to tone yourself down slightly, just ever so slightly, because if you do things at full volume, everyone's going to be deafened, and that's definitely not something you want. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, there is a conjunction between Venus and Pluto. Yeah, Venus and Pluto are making a conjunction today. And so this Venus-Pluto conjunction may say something about other people. When I say relationships, it can be about your social relationships. It doesn't necessarily have to be, one-to-one relationships, but it might indicate that, certain people are taking themselves seriously. They are quite intense, and they're very focused on themselves and what they feel they need to do. And Aries, you might be of a view that they're taking themselves too seriously and that maybe they need to lighten up. But before saying too much, before you aggravate people too much, ask yourself what is really going on. And it could be that certain people need to be left to their own devices, and if someone is taking something too seriously, well, they might have good reason. So that's one way in which the Venus-Pluto conjunction could work. Venus-Pluto could also function in terms of another person wanting to be in control. I mean, I know that Aries, you want to control things. I think you're very aware of how much energy you have and your capacity for creating change. But maybe other people have their own ways of working, maybe more subtle than you, but nonetheless it could be real. So don't assume that other people are always going to be passive, and it may be that they're sort of working in quite a subtle way to ensure that they get their way. So it's not all about you, and you need to, as far as possible, think about things from other people's perspective and ask yourself, what are their real motivations? But don't worry about that too much. I think the key point about today, Aries, is that there's a lot going on, and you can very much be part of it, and you can really be at the center of things. Taurus. Well, the Aquarius season has really kicked off now, because we got a load of stuff now in Aquarius. We've got up to 5 planets in Aquarius, and that does include the moon. Okay, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, it may take some time for the Sun and Mercury to move into Aquarius. It may not be until tomorrow, Wednesday, that Mercury moves into Aquarius. But overall, the Aquarius season is very much with us. And Taurus, that is important for you, because Aquarius is a sign that matters. Aquarius for you is a sign that is about what you want. It's about your ambitions, your plans for the future, whatever it is that you're trying to project. I mean, your ambitions, what ambitions you're trying to push forward, onto the outside world. And perhaps recently you've held back. You felt that it wasn't right, or the time wasn't right. But now things really are changing. So think about whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, and remember that Pluto has been in Aquarius for a long time. I mean, it went into Aquarius, what was it, November the 17th, 2024. So that's well over a year ago. And with Pluto in Aquarius, this is the impetus to transform, to have an impact, to you have your ideas, you've been working on your ideas, and now it's time to get them out into the open. So it's important, Taurus, that you think about whatever it is that you want to achieve, and you give it everything. Now this this emphasis in Aquarius, okay, it's not going to last forever, but it will be around for for a few weeks. Okay, the moon will move out of Aquarius pretty quickly, pretty soon. I think tomorrow the moon moves into Pisces. So today, Tuesday, is the time to start. And don't feel, Taurus, that you have to necessarily do things by the book. You don't have to follow established procedure. You have to follow your procedure, and you have, I hope, been developing a clear idea about what it is you want to put into action. And in your own way, you can be, pretty independent-minded about it. And this sort of links with the fact that Uranus is in Taurus. Uranus is in your sign. Uranus is going to stay in your sign until April. Then it moves out of Taurus and doesn't come back for another 70 or 80 years. But while Uranus is in Taurus, it is a time for you to be dynamic and original, and to really think about what it is that you want to contribute. And anyway, now you have it all. It's there for you, and you shouldn't necessarily rely too much on other people. It is about you. In fact, if you were to assume that other people were to help you, that other people would cooperate, I think you might be disappointed. Other people are not on particularly good form from your perspective, so it's got to be done sort of in your way. And one aspect we have today is we have Venus making a conjunction to Pluto. So Venus triggers Pluto. I mean, I've just talked about Pluto. I'm saying that Pluto is a planet that's going to stay in Aquarius for a long time, until the 2040s, early 2040s. I think, is it 2042 that it moves into Pisces? Something like that. And so with Venus conjunct Pluto, you are reminded that Pluto is in Aquarius, and you are reminded that there are things you want to do, and it's okay to be demanding, especially now. I don't think other people are particularly cooperative, but it shouldn't matter, Taurus, because you can do things in your own way. You don't necessarily need anyone's help. And perhaps if you don't have people around you, that's a good thing, because right now, Taurus, you're very independent minded, and you want to do things your way, and you can do things your way, and it's important that you are original. Now, I said that other people may not be entirely cooperative, and they may do things that are surprising. One aspect we have is Mars trine Uranus. Mars trine Uranus, it's an aspect that affects all of us, but from your perspective with Mars trine Uranus, that may be about what another person does. And Mars trine Uranus could be about someone doing something that you really weren't expecting, that is surprising. And is it something good, or is it something bad, or is it something that kind of depends on your interpretation? And I think it probably is. So when you see events unfolding that you hadn't planned for, don't panic and don't blame necessarily. Some people might be a law unto themselves, or it's possible that they might be accident prone, and it's possible that you may be impacted by another person's dynamism, or perhaps by another person's mistake. We'll have to see. But the key point is, not to panic. And overall, Taurus, this is a time when things really should be happening. So Taurus, make it happen. And if there's something you want, if you have a burning ambition, then I think now is the time. Don't leave it too long, because it might be too late. But these planets, they're in Aquarius for a few weeks, so there's not an immediate urgency, but the sooner you get going on things, the better. Gemini. There is, as you probably know, a lot of things going on in Aquarius. The emphasis is, very much on this sign. It's been developing over the last few days. We had Venus moving into Aquarius. We have got the Sun moving into Aquarius. Mercury is getting ready to move into Aquarius. I mean, Mercury might already be in Aquarius. I mean, of course, Mercury is important because Mercury is your ruler. So if you are in the UK, Mercury moves into Aquarius at, I think, 4:41 in the afternoon. So that means if you're in the Americas, it will be in the morning that Mercury will move into Aquarius. If you're in Australia, it won't be until tomorrow, Wednesday. But you can certainly feel the change. And with Mercury moving into Aquarius, I think that is something very positive. I think you've probably had enough of Mercury moving through Capricorn. Mercury in Capricorn was perhaps rather cautious and feeling a sense of limitation, not being able to do everything that it wanted to do, being held back, perhaps having to be overly emotional. That's not at all what Mercury wanted to do. But there was a time for emotion. There was a time for seriousness. There was a time for sort of contemplation and getting used to the fact that the world is complicated. But now that Mercury is moving into Aquarius, there are more sort of opportunities to understand the world, to play with ideas, perhaps to review your own ideas, and perhaps some of your views need some change, need to be reviewed. I mean, Aquarius is a very political sign. It is about society, and it's about your view of society and how you relate, for example, to political events. And so with Mercury moving into Aquarius, there is perhaps a lot of thinking and contemplating. Though I should point out that Mercury, as it moves into Aquarius, it's getting very close to a conjunction of the Sun. In other words, Mercury is moving towards combustion, and in a few days' time, Mercury will be combust. So that, I think, means that you have to be a little bit careful. Geminis are clever. We all know Geminis are clever. Well, of course, I would say that because I got my sun in Gemini. But sometimes you can look at the wrong things. You can be distracted, and you get distracted maybe by just looking at the wrong information. There's lots of information around. You're aware of that. Lots of ways of looking at a problem. And you might just get caught on one approach. Maybe it's something you hear. You hear someone being very convincing. I don't know, you could watch a YouTube video and someone says something that makes perfect sense, and you decide that is the truth of the matter, and it's not the truth of the matter. So don't listen too hard to any one opinion, because if you do, you could really mislead yourself. And if you are at the moment coming to conclusions, over the next few days, then I would suggest you don't. I would suggest you just leave it. Let things develop, because you don't see the full picture. And if you recognize that, you're fine. You're not going to be deluded. But if you're looking for an answer, you're looking for a complete solution, you might at best be disappointed. At worst, you could be seriously misled, and we don't want that. And maybe the fact that Mercury is sextile Neptune. I mean, it's a nice sextile, but Mercury sextile Neptune. Mercury as Mercury moves from Capricorn to Aquarius, it makes that sextile to Neptune, and that's a nice aspect if it's treated properly. I mean, it's quite an emotional, spiritual aspect. It's about vague feelings, but it can also be about trying to make up your mind. So if you do try to make up your mind about something, with Mercury sextile Neptune, with Mercury starting to make a conjunction to the Sun, I think that wouldn't necessarily be good. So be as open-minded as possible. Consider just all the different ways in which things could unfold. And right now you haven't got the solutions. At a later stage, the solutions will manifest. But do try to be patient. It could be difficult to be patient because at the moment, Gemini, the issue of power could actually be quite important to you. You want to be in control. You kind of want to be the one pulling the levers, but are you going to be able to? Yeah, you can probably. You are, a hard person to stop, a hard person to contradict. But just because you get your way doesn't mean that you've got it right, and you shouldn't mistake agreement for the truth. So if everyone agrees with you, doesn't mean you've got it right. It might be the worst thing you want to hear. So if you're getting complete support for your ideas and everyone thinks you're great, everyone is telling you you're great, then think again. That can be the problem with power. And if you're obsessed with getting your way, then yeah, you might get your way, but there could be a cost. Cancer. Moon is moving through Aquarius all day, and it moves into Pisces tomorrow, Wednesday at 6:50 a.m. So yeah, that means that if you're in California, for example, then late today, very late today, late this evening, the moon will move into Pisces. But I wouldn't worry about that too much. I think the point is, moon is in Aquarius, all day long, effectively, and it does start making a square to Uranus at the end of the day. But that's pretty much it. And that's the interesting thing about the moon. The moon really doesn't make any aspects of note in Aquarius. It's at the beginning of Aquarius. It made I think it made a conjunction to Venus, and it made a conjunction to Pluto. But really, because of the configuration of other planets, it's just been a bit low key, and maybe that is something that you're picking up on. You perhaps have had ideas, and there are things you've wanted to do, but somehow you just haven't been able to get it together. The situation just wasn't right. Now that could be because you had the weekend, and if you're in the United States, well, Monday was Martin Luther King Day, so maybe a lot of people were not working, or they were focusing on other things because it's a holiday. So that might have been how the moon in Aquarius has worked out. But I don't think that you should, assume that anything is going to happen. I mean, you have the ideas, and you can see that there are big things going on, big concepts, perhaps big plans, but actually creating real effects, that could be hard work. In fact, the only major lunar aspect that takes place, at least using sort of Greenwich Mean Time, is a sextile between the moon and Chiron. So the moon at 22 degrees Aquarius it's applying to a sextile of Chiron. So moon sextile Chiron, it's quite a gentle aspect, particularly Chiron. I mean, Chiron is a very small, I don't know what you'd call it, asteroid, comet. It's not technically a planet, so it's a minor aspect. But you might say with moon sextile Chiron, you have some opportunity to be yourself, to be different, particularly perhaps with all these planets in Aquarius. And with these planets in Aquarius, it is a time where your views and your impressions matter. And something perhaps will make you annoyed and sort of angry, and you might be able to do something about it. And it's a kind of anger that is not pointless. It's there for a reason. And if you're annoyed about something, if you feel that something really needs to be changed, then maybe it can be changed. Maybe there is something that you can do in a constructive and perhaps healing way. I mean, it's Chiron. We have to think about healing sometimes. So perhaps you can have a fortunate influence on some of the people around you. But I think you should be sort of avoiding drama. I mean, there is drama around. I mean, Mars is making a trine to Uranus, for example. I mean, Mars is still in Capricorn, still in your opposite sign, making that trine to Uranus. It's also making a sextile to Saturn. And so that may say something about other people's behavior, perhaps a behavior of someone who's very close to you, and their behavior could be perhaps rather surprising, and it might seem to have many implications. It may seem to be going in many different directions, but maybe not. Maybe something that just seems dramatic and really meaningful and consequential, in the end could turn out to be nothing. And that could say a lot about today. Today, Cancer, I think it's perhaps about your subjective impressions. You might have big ideas, but I just don't think anything is going to happen. And maybe Cancer, that's a good thing. Leo. So Aquarius is your opposite sign. I mean, and we now have a lot of planets in Aquarius. So what does that mean? Well, I think there is an argument for saying that we should see the 12 signs as being 6 polarities. So your polarity is Leo Aquarius, and so maybe you've got a sort of hidden Aquarius to you. It's perhaps represents the side of your self and your personality that you are least aware of, that you may be sort of most likely to project onto other people, and it may not always be easy, but it's just possible that what you see going on around you is just a reflection of your unconscious. Especially with so many planets in Aquarius. We right now we've got 5 planets in Aquarius. At least, if certainly if you're in the Americas, Mercury goes into Aquarius sort of in the morning. Okay, not if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but we've got 5 planets in Aquarius, and so that puts a lot of focus on the things about yourself that you are least aware of. So if you notice people behaving in a particular way and you find yourself responding quite powerfully to other people's behavior, or perhaps to other people's words, you are being reminded of an aspect of yourself that you are not fully aware of. So there is a possibility of projection. Getting annoyed with other people because you're annoyed with yourself, or alternatively, when you see someone doing something that perhaps you regard as being quite admirable and you secretly might be a bit jealous of them, well, that's perhaps telling you about what you should be doing. And perhaps you're not doing it, you're watching someone else do it, but it can be yours. And so as far as is possible, Leo, it is a time to take control and not just feel that it's all about other people doing things, the world doing things. It's not about you. You can take control, but you've got to do it in a way that is subtle. You for example, need to give people a chance. You need to give people a chance to explain themselves. I mean, I know I've just looked at things from a very psychological perspective, but you can look at all these planets in Aquarius in a very real, human way. And if you do that, that may say that other people's decisions do matter. If other people want to do things, then maybe you should give them a chance. Let people express themselves, and in the process, you might have to let go of your ego. And of course, that is the issue with sort of Leo Aquarius as a polarity. If we think about Leo as a sign, Leo is a quite sort of ego-orientated sign. It's powerful. I mean, the Sun rules Leo, and it's that's you. Okay, even if you've got Leo rising rather than your Sun in Leo, it's still a powerful sign. And sometimes you just have to be aware of the other side of Leo, and the other side of Leo, the side that you're perhaps least conscious of, is perhaps being completely objective, not being at the center of things, allowing things to just unfold in their own way. And it's not about ego. It's perhaps about thought, and it's about listening, and it's about understanding, and it is about objectivity, because Aquarius is an objective sign. It should be an objective sign. Okay, it isn't always, but ideally it is objective. It looks at things as they are. It's not about people's egos getting upset and so forth. But having said all that, Leo, I think that the issue of power is important today. The Sun is starting to make a conjunction to Mercury. I mean, it is making a conjunction to Mercury, but it's getting very close. And right now, if you look at the chart, you'll notice that the Sun in Aquarius is 3 minutes short of Pluto. It's also 3 minutes short of Mars. So the Sun is halfway between Mars and Pluto. So it's making conjunction to Pluto, making conjunction to Mars, and because it's halfway, the Sun is on the Mars-Pluto midpoint. Mercury is on the Mars-Pluto midpoint as well. So Mars-Pluto as a pairing is about power, and you are going to want to be in control, and you're going to want to assert yourself. And I'm not talking about anything vague. I'm talking about really an intense desire, and you can't shake it off. It's there. And so, Leo, you need to use this ability. I think one can perhaps describe it as ability in the right way. You have strong willpower, but how are you going to use it? If you've got strong willpower, that probably means that through the power of your personality, you can get your way. But is it appropriate? Is it the right thing to do? And just because you can force people into line doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And as far as possible, Leo, you should give people a chance to express themselves and to tell you what's on their mind, and see people as individuals. Because if you see people as individuals, you're seeing yourself as an individual. So in the end, today might be about mutual respect and, most importantly, complete self-awareness, being able to see what's going on around you, potentially as a reflection of yourself. And so if you can take that approach, which is a very mature, psychologically mature approach, then I think that you'll be able to sort of make the most of the day's opportunities. Virgo. It occurs to you, Virgo, that things aren't exactly right. They're not exactly how you like them to be. Things could be better. Well, things could always be better. But at the moment, Virgo, I think that you have a chance to organize and to reorganize. And if you're if you are not happy with the way things are, then I'm fairly confident that you can make the required changes. And okay, it might mean a bit of work, and it also might require a certain amount of sort of individuality. So if we're talking about organization and structure, one often associates that as something boring and rote, and you have to do things using you have to use established techniques. But it's not like that. You have a particular way of doing things, of processing things, which is it's very Virgo, it's very you, but right now it's very original, and it's not like you're asking advice on how to get something together. You have your own plans, and if you are developing your own plans, then keep going. I mean, you're doing it right, but don't be too rigid. I mean, you could be rigid because Mercury is your ruler. Mercury is moving from Capricorn into Aquarius, and it's making a conjunction to the Sun. And when you've got Mercury making a conjunction to the Sun, well, that's Mercury being combust. It can sometimes mean that you can't always see the wood from the trees. You just see things in one way. You have an idea about the way things should be structured, and this idea may be a real reflection of who you are, but you shouldn't assume that it is the right approach. It may be that you just haven't taken into account perhaps other people and their needs. Also, consider the possibility that your own unconscious is intervening. Your unconscious is strong right now. Your emotions, distant emotions, the past, your memories, they are having an impact on you. And if you allow the past and your memories to have too much of an impact, you may find that you're doing things someone else's way. That someone else may have been dead for decades. You may not have seen them for decades, but you might be just living out a past pattern, and that's not something you want to do, and that is not something that you should do. And with all these planets in Aquarius, Aquarius season is very much with us. It's a time, Virgo, to be thinking about yourself and to be thinking about your health and well-being. I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but probably things could be better. There could be improvements, and it's important to be open-minded when you think about your health and well-being. It's possible with all these planets in Aquarius that there is a novel approach to looking at your lifestyle that might be worth exploring. Now, I'm talking about lifestyle. I'm not talking about anything medical, but I think you're going to be actually quite interested in sort of different ideas about health. So it might be a good time, not just today, but over the next few weeks for sort of, reading the latest research about health, seeing what other people have to say. And it may be that there are things relating to health and well-being that everyone has taken for granted, but there's some new research which might show that everyone's got it wrong, or there might be something new you can do to help you. Also, technology. I mean, technology. I know that people use technology for health, whether it's something simple like a digital weighing machine or instruments for measuring, blood pressure, heart rate, how far you run, how fast you walked, how many steps you're doing in a mile, or all that kind of stuff. That might be worth considering. Maybe in the past you thought it was just a waste of time, but it may be that technology can help you sort things out. Okay, it can help you sort things out in a non-health sense, sort of administratively, organizationally, things like computers and spreadsheets and all of this. But it may also say something about health and diet, and what you can what you can actually do to make yourself feel better. I mean, hopefully you're feeling fine as it is, but maybe things could be even better. And additionally, Virgo, I think you, like a lot of people today, it's not just you, but I think a lot of people today do want to be in control. And I think that includes you. And you don't want things left to chance, and you want to be in control over lots of different things. And perhaps one thing you want to be in control of is your own body. You don't want to be pushed around by your body. So we might be seeing a slight mind-body split there. I mean, it's always an issue, isn't it? The mind-body split. I'm coming at it from the perspective of a Gemini. If you're a Gemini, you've got a real mind-body split issue. But it can work out for other signs. And I think at the moment, you've got your mind. You want to do things your way. Your body might have other ideas. So do be careful. How far you push yourself, but also your mind might have ideas about the way your body should be, and you want that power, you want that control. That might be a good thing, but you just need to make sure that you don't push it too far. And particularly at the moment with Mercury conjunct the Sun, you're not thinking entirely clearly. There could be moments where you make mistakes, or perhaps your emotions intervene, but over the next few days, and certainly once that Mercury conjunct Sun is finished, maybe over the next week, you will be starting to think, I think, about body and organization, how to work things out, how to be on best form, and I think that in that department you can certainly do some good work. Libra, things have changed, very quickly. Not so long ago we had everything in Capricorn, and now we've got pretty much everything in Aquarius. And of course, from a Libran perspective, that is a major change. Capricorn perhaps was a sign that, to an extent, was weighing you down. Capricorn perhaps represented, your broader priorities, and you were perhaps focusing on stability and making sure that, both feet were firmly on the ground. And now, with planets moving into Aquarius, moving into a fellow air sign, you're feeling better. You're feeling that you can, be yourself, and you can sort of link up with, who you are. And so I do think that is very positive. Additionally, we've got Venus is in Aquarius, and Venus is making a conjunction to Pluto. So this Venus-Pluto conjunction is empowering, and it allows you to do what is important to you. And if something matters, it's an essential part of your creative self-expression, then I think that you'll be able to really embrace it. And so, Libra, do what is important, do what makes you feel good, do what makes you feel happy, and don't worry too much about what other people are saying. And in fact, Libra, I'm not convinced that other people are going to be particularly useful. I think that if you try to spend time with other people, if you try to listen to other people, if you try to reach out to other people, it might be disappointing. You might just find that there's nothing going on, and that people aren't especially impressive. And in the main, I mean, I'm not saying that is a complete picture, but I'm thinking particularly about people who you don't necessarily know very well. They might not be your friends, or they might not be a partner, or someone who you have a sort of close one-to-one relationship. I'm just more talking about people in general, people who you have to associate with, who you want to associate with, there's just not going to be a great deal of support. And that really shouldn't bother you, because I think that you have got everything you need to have a really sort of happy and successful day. And it's, you know, it's not just about today. It's about the next few weeks as you have these planets moving through Aquarius, and do feel, positive about yourself. And if there's something you want to do that you in the past you might have felt you weren't good enough, or that you were worried that you might get a negative response, don't worry about it. Don't worry about making a fool of yourself. Don't worry about embarrassing yourself. I mean, I know you're a Libran, and the social side of things can be important to you, and you are thinking about impressions, but now is not a time to be thinking about impressions. It really is a time to be thinking about yourself. Now, as far as other people are concerned, okay, I've just said that the broad mass of people, the people you might try to be in contact with, it's not going to be, I don't think, very useful. There might be quite a lot of negativity flying around, but there could be certain individuals who are difficult to ignore, difficult to avoid. There is a trine aspect between Mars and Uranus. Mars is still in Capricorn, and Mars might represent someone who is perhaps quite close to you, more likely to be male rather than female. After all, Mars is a masculine planet. I mean, it could be a woman, but I think it's more likely to be a man. But Mars trine Uranus could represent a man who is very definite, who is unpredictable, who does something that you really weren't expecting, and that might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing. And so do monitor other people's behavior and what they're doing, what they're planning on doing. And it's quite possible Mars trine Uranus could represent someone who is too impulsive. They do something and they might make a mistake. And if someone is on the verge of making a mistake, perhaps you need to be aware of that. But at the same time, maybe they're on the verge of doing something really original. I mean, after all, Mars is trine Uranus, and Mars is also sextile Saturn. And so with Mars sextile Saturn, there might be the possibility here that you can have an influence. And I say that because, Saturn does have a relationship to Libra, because Saturn is exalted in Libra. So we might say that Saturn is kind of representative of you. So perhaps, Libra, you can have a moderating influence. Now, you might not think you can have a moderating influence, that you might be dealing with, unstable elements, people who are just a law unto themselves, but you don't know until you try. And so it is actually possible to exercise some control, and maybe not total control, but it's a kind of control that could be quite constructive. You can maybe help someone make the most of their creativity without their creativity turning in on itself and being destructive. So in that sense, today may not just be about what you can create, but also what other people can create as well, if you give them a chance. But I must emphasize that you do have to be quite choosy about other people, because just a lot of other people, as I've already said, are really of not much use. Scorpio. Mars is in focus. It really is in focus, because it's making a trine to Uranus. So we've got Mars, your ruler, in Capricorn, exalted in Capricorn, making a trine to Uranus. It's also making a sextile to Saturn. So, the question is this Mars trine Uranus useful? Is it dangerous? I mean, it could be both. So if you think about it, I mean, Uranus is a planet which relates to revolution, to rapid change, to maybe overthrowing the status quo. So that may say something about you. You're not happy with the way things are, and at a sort of a deep level, you want to create change. You may not be fully aware of how much you want to create change. We could be talking about an unconscious process, but whatever it is, you feel that you can have an impact, and you can, get people to pay attention to you. And so you're not prepared to just be a passive observer. I mean, even if you try to be a passive observer, you might still find yourself having an impact. And so, Scorpio, be aware of the way you feel. Be aware of your desire for change. Be aware of your anger with Mars trine Uranus. If you're not fully aware of your anger and your frustration, then that Mars trine Uranus could turn against you. But I think if you use Mars trine Uranus in a constructive way, that is about you deciding you want to have an impact and then having that impact. And Mars is also sextile Saturn. So I think that Mars sextile Saturn is probably about structure. It's about discipline. It's also about self-respect. So you perhaps take your own raw and unpredictable energy and you turn it into something really useful. You can turn it into a real powerhouse. So Scorpio, I think it's a day when you can have a real influence, and you can cover a great deal of ground. And additionally, from a verbal perspective, I don't think you're going to have any problems. You're going to be able to tell everyone what you think, what you believe, what's important to you. I don't think you'll have any problems communicating your fundamental message. And so that is good. But for many people today, Scorpio included, respect does matter. You have to take into consideration other people's views and other people's pace. Venus is making a conjunction to Pluto in Aquarius, and Venus conjunct Pluto may represent a person who is perhaps quite set in their ways, set in their ideas, and also wanting to be in control. Maybe they want to be in control more than you do. And so when you are sort of flying around with this Mars trine Uranus, do think about other people and what other people are presenting, and consider their particular states. People don't advertise their states. They don't say what's going on in their mind, particularly now with Venus conjunct Pluto. And you can guess, you can assume, but can you? I don't think we can ever know what's going on in another person's mind and another person's heart. So give other people a chance. Give them some space, and if they don't want to say anything, then maybe that's the way it is. And so that is an aspect of your life today. And of course, it does depend on your circumstances, but particularly if you're in a close relationship with someone, or there is someone around you all the time, whoever that person is, maybe you share a living space with them, whatever. I think it's going to be very important that you pay them respect. I think that matters. So just because you can say something, you can speak with great power and conviction. Just because you can say something doesn't mean that you always should say something. And there may be moments during the day when the best approach is to say nothing at all. Sagittarius. The last couple of readings for Sagittarius, I have been a bit sort of non-committal, and I wouldn't have said quite negative, but I have been kind of suggesting that there's not not a huge amount going on. Now, as far as what's happening today, there is change. Change is happening, all the time. We've got a lot of planets moving into Aquarius. We had planets moving into Aquarius yesterday, and when I was doing the reading for Monday, I was talking about Aquarius. Now there's more and more stuff going into Aquarius, and I think that that's good news. With these planets moving into Aquarius, you just you have more variety. It does seem, from your perspective, that perhaps the ice is starting to melt. Now, I know that Aquarius is perhaps seen as a rather icy sign, particularly in the northern hemisphere, when the sun goes into Aquarius, in the depths of winter. But it is the case that, Aquarius, it's a positive sign. It's a sign that has no real conflict with Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a fire sign. Aquarius is a water sign. It kind of gives you what you need, and so you have a chance now to say what's on your mind. And I say, I think that it's perhaps a day of words rather than action. Yeah, you might like to do things, but what exactly are you going to do? If you were to take physical action over the course of a day, I just don't think it would necessarily go anywhere. It just might sort of zoom around from place to place, but there's not going to be any actual results. And perhaps that's a good thing. And with these planets in Aquarius, you should, maybe think about just understanding the world in which you live. The world is changing. It's just a huge change. These planets moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius, and this is the future. I mean, one can see Aquarius as being the future. It's supposedly a very futuristic sign. Just because it's the future doesn't mean it's good. I mean, the future can be frightening, but you have a chance, Sagittarius, to really understand what's going on. You don't have to reach any conclusions. You can talk about the future. You can write about the future. You can observe the future. You can read about the future, and so if you can really get to grips with it, and it's also good time for understanding sort of new technology. So if you read books about technology or even manuals. So if for example you have bought a piece of technology that you don't understand, then now would be a very good time to find the manual. So the manual might have come with the technology, or you may be able to download the manual. But you might have taken the view that's just not what you want to do. You might regard that as being a waste of time. You may have thought you're not going to understand the manual, but give it another shot. So if there is something you don't understand, maybe you paid good money for it, or you were given it and it's just sitting there doing nothing, then Sagittarius, I would strongly recommend that you give it another go. It may not be quite as complicated as you imagined, and all these planets in Aquarius are going to help you to understand what's going on. And in the process, in a sort of quite subtle way, you might recognize that you have a natural facility with something, that you thought was completely alien. So yeah, it's a time, Sagittarius, for just giving yourself a chance, and at the same time recognizing that you don't know everything, that you could know more, and perhaps there are certain areas where you've got a blind spot. You've been confused by something. Maybe you've been confused by an idea. That could be part of it. Sagittarius is a sign that does like a moral code. And that moral code can be anything. And that moral code can be political, it could be religious, it could be spiritual. You like that thing. I mean, I know you might be in denial about it, but I think you very often do. And I do think the Sagittarius can be a very moralistic sign, yes. And perhaps some aspect of this code that you have been living your life by is somewhat flawed. It's not like the whole thing has to be thrown out, but you may have just been ever so slightly dogmatic, and you might be being ever so slightly dogmatic. And this is the case, certainly as Mercury moves into Aquarius. Mercury makes a conjunction to the Sun, and it may be, for example, your ideas about where you should be going, your direction, your work, if appropriate. You've haven't looked at it in a very broad-minded way. You've just been focusing on one thing, and if you can just be more broad-minded and you just take the view that you haven't got all the answers, and also that no one else has got the answers either, and anyone who claims to have all the answers should be treated with great caution. So a bit of flexibility as these planets move into Aquarius, particularly when Mercury moves into Aquarius, would be no bad thing. Capricorn. We certainly have big changes afoot. Everyone is going to be affected. As far as you're concerned, Capricorn, I mentioned yesterday that you've got, with these planets in Aquarius, that this might say something about your relationship to money. And I think that this relationship to money, it could intensify. Aquarius is after all the sign following Capricorn, and so with Aquarius you're thinking about what do you have, what resources do you have, and I think that you're able, if you so wish, to be quite open-minded about money and what can be done with money, and perhaps how new approaches to money might be useful. They could be very destructive, but it's perhaps something that you can be exploring, not just today, but over the next few weeks, while you've got all these planets in Aquarius. Now Mars is still in Capricorn, and Mars is in a good place. It's exalted, and also Mars is making a trine to Uranus, and this Mars trine Uranus is also tied up with Saturn. So we've got Saturn sextile Uranus, like we had yesterday. We've got that. We've got Mars, and we've got Mars making a sextile to Saturn, and Mars is making a trine to Uranus, and so these aspects do have an impact on you, and I think they actually have quite a positive impact on you. I think that it allows you to really make things happen. It's not just about money, it's about you being aware of your own originality and your own specialness. Saturn sextile Uranus, Saturn in Pisces. Okay, you might say Saturn in Pisces is somewhat cautious. It is Saturn, but it's in a mutable sign. So you're not totally fixed there. You do have the capacity to embrace variety, and with Saturn sextile Uranus, you have the capacity to embrace change. In fact, you can be part of the change, because things are changing all the time. And sometimes when everything changes, we think that we're out of control, but you have no responsibility. This is just crazy forces. What can you do? But Capricorn, I think you really do have to appreciate your agency. That you can be in the center of things. You can be the innovator, and you can be the dynamic innovator, because Mars is sextile Saturn, Mars is trine Uranus, and if you want to create change, then now is the time to do it. And perhaps you need to do it like now. Friday, Mars moves into Capricorn. So today's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. What are you planning on doing on those few days? So over the next couple of days, really, try to push forward. I mean, if you have an idea, if you want to be original, if you want to make everyone stop and think, then I think you certainly can. And if you make the effort, you can be one of the most powerful signs of the 12 because of this Mars trine Uranus. But Mars trine Uranus, it's about shaking things up. But the sextile Saturn means that you have a broad idea. You're not just being chaotic. You're not just being disruptive for the sake of it. You have a plan, and once you create disruption, you then have to deal with the consequences. You have to put things back in order in different places. And so structuring, restructuring, shaking things up, breaking things down, building things up again, restoring things to what they were before, but also incorporating your kind of change, that's something you can do. So Capricorn, I'm quite positive about today, and in fact I'm quite positive about the next few days. I think that you can really have a powerful impact. But one thing I should say is that Saturn is still making a sextile to Mars and sextile to Uranus. I talked about that sextile Mars, sextile Uranus in a positive light, but you can look at it in a negative light as well. And it can make you more accident prone from usual. So it's very important, Capricorn, that you are careful. You're careful anyway. Capricorn has a reputation for being a careful sign, but maybe over the next couple of days, you need to be, at least on a physical level, sort of more careful than usual. Don't leave things to chance. Don't make mistakes. Don't make mistakes in terms of your body and the physical world. Just think about what you do in a physical sense. But that shouldn't hold you back. It doesn't take away from what I've said earlier. You can be someone who is very powerful, and you can create change. You can almost create revolution as well. Aquarius, you're very much moving into focus now, aren't you? Because the Aquarius season has started. 1:45 a.m. This morning, London time. The sun went into Aquarius, so that would have been sort of late yesterday if you're in the Americas. So with the sun moving into Aquarius, you now have Sun, Pluto, Venus, Moon in Aquarius. Mercury is moving into Aquarius. It might be today, might be tomorrow. Most of us, I think, by today, Mercury will be moving into Aquarius. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it won't be until tomorrow. But we've got a huge amount of emphasis on Aquarius, and of course we've got Mars moving into Aquarius on Friday. So for you, Aquarius, perhaps your time has arrived, and your time has arrived on several levels. Because I'm really thinking about Pluto. This is because Pluto has, of course, been in Aquarius for a long time. The last time it went into Aquarius was November the 17th, 2024. And so with Pluto in Aquarius, it is a general time, I hope, when you are aware of your power and your ability to create transformation. That's what Pluto is about. Pluto is a planet of transformation, and it's a planet of the collective and how the collective is developing. And so you, Aquarius, with that Pluto in your sign, you have your finger on the pulse. You know how it's all going. You know where it's all developing deep down. And now that you've got all these planets moving into Aquarius, making aspects to Pluto. Today we've got Venus making a conjunction to Pluto, but over the course of a week, you're going to see other planets making a conjunction to Pluto. So, it's a time when you really need to have a strong sense of who you are and what you can do, and you can really project yourself. And so don't keep things to yourself anymore. There was a time for being secretive. But I think that time is past, or at least that time is passing. And especially once Mars moves into Aquarius on Friday. And if you think about the aspects today, I mean, Saturn is your ruler, and it's making a sextile to Mars. So you've got Mars sextile your ruler. Now, if you are completely stubborn and you absolutely insist in claiming that Uranus rules Aquarius, which it doesn't, by the way, but if you insist on claiming that Uranus rules Aquarius, then Mars is trine Uranus. So whichever way you look at it, Mars is aspecting your ruler. As far as I'm concerned, Uranus is associated with Aquarius. Mars is trine Uranus. Mars is sextile Saturn. So those Mars aspects are really giving you strength, and they are giving you real dynamism. The energy is definitely there. Now, where does that energy come from? Well, Mars is in Capricorn, so that energy might be coming from a place which isn't entirely obvious. It could be coming from the depths of your soul, but it's still there. And so if you feel that you want to make change, that you want to shake things up, then Aquarius, you absolutely can. And the question then is, how far do you take it? I mean, Mars is trine Uranus. Saturn is sextile Uranus. Mars is sextile Saturn. Saturn is conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So there is some danger, Aquarius, that you perhaps take things too far. That once you get into something, you exaggerate, and you just keep going, and then something could in the end go wrong because you're too extreme. I mean, are you extreme? I mean, you could be extreme. I mean, there is that possibility. So a bit of moderation is required, but you don't want too much moderation. I mean, we don't want a situation, Aquarius, where you dilute yourself. And so, overall, Aquarius, make the most of this time, because, you're going to have all these planets in Aquarius for, the next few weeks. But, in the end, they'll move on, they'll move into Pisces. And so ask yourself, what do you want to do? How do you want to project yourself? And, what do you want to achieve by the end of February? Because now is your moment. And if you miss that chance, well, in the end, you'll still be left with Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is something long-term. The next few decades, couple of decades, until the early 2040s, Pluto will be in Aquarius. So you're still someone who is able to create change. You're still someone who is in touch with the collective pulse. But just right now, you just have a chance to bring it all down to earth and to make it real. Pisces. There is stuff going on. I mean, it is quite a busy day. For everyone, and it doesn't really matter, about your sign. Mars is making a trine to Uranus. Mars is sextile Saturn, and Saturn is sextile Uranus. And I think that is important, as I think I was really saying yesterday, because Saturn is in Pisces, and I kind of think that while Saturn is in Pisces, it's kind of like your sort of honorary ruling planet. I mean, I know that, of course, Saturn is not your ruling planet, but while Saturn is in Pisces, I think it does link with you. And so with Saturn sextile Uranus and Saturn sextile Mars, then I think that gives you the ability to make an impact. Everyone has an ability to make an impact at the moment, I think, regardless of their sign. But for you, it might require some conscious effort. You may have to decide that you want to make an impact, because I think that part of you, Pisces, would like to do nothing, would like to stay on the sidelines. Now, you can stay on the sidelines if you want to, but with this Mars sextile Saturn, if you, for example, choose to be sociable, to interact with your friends and colleagues, and maybe go to some gathering, or I don't know if there are any parties around, but if you want to do that, probably not necessarily what you do want to do, but if you do that, if you are surrounded by people, you can certainly have an influence, and you can maybe have a stabilizing influence as well. So it is a crazy day for many of us, but I think that you have an opportunity to somehow sort of calm things down and get things in perspective. Because being a Pisces, you kind of understand the principle of craziness. You are the ocean. The ocean in its own way is a bit crazy because things move around. You've always got currents floating around, swirling around. You know about all of that, and so you can deal with the currents of humanity, the swirling currents of humanity, and you can sort of deal with it all in a way that shows a quiet talent. It's not necessarily an obvious talent, but your people skills, are pretty good at the moment, and you know how to gently manipulate and to move people in particular directions, but provided you're not too heavy-handed about it. So that's a way in which the day could unfold. But I just feel that you're not particularly in the mood for really being in the center of things. It's not what you want. So the question is, how much do you need to do, and how much do you want to do? I mean, you can certainly do what is necessary, and I think that you're going to be able to maintain control throughout the day. That won't be a problem. But if you want to bring in your own material, if you want to create change, if you want to suggest interesting possibilities, you certainly can. After all, Saturn is sextile Uranus, and also Mars is sextile Saturn. So your Saturn is there. Your Saturn can harness whatever is going on around you, and you can harness in such a way that in the end, the day works out pretty well for you. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 41, which is decrease. So decrease on the surface doesn't sound great, does it? I mean, you think about decrease, things are diminishing, things are not so good. Perhaps we get a feeling of decline, but that's not how the I Ching sees decrease. Decrease is seen as a natural process. If something becomes too excessive, it naturally has to reduce, and that's a part of the flow of things. And so we might find in our life some things have gone too far. We want to get rid of them. We want to pull back, or we've got too much stuff, too much garbage. There are sort of boxes of things that we don't need, things we will never need, and we might have some vague sentimental attachment to them, but really it's time to get rid of them. Whether it's, I don't know, in the United States, that would be sort of goodwill, or in the UK, Oxfam, whatever method you use for getting rid of your stuff, now might be a time to do it. Of course, you've got to make sure you don't throw away anything that really is genuinely valuable. And it's not just about things, it's about ideas. We've built up these ideas, and now it's time to get rid of them. Maybe when we think about all these planets moving into Aquarius, Aquarius is a very idea sign. And so if we want to embrace new ideas, a new way of looking at the world and society, we have to throw out the old. So that's the general way of looking at this hexagram. And we have a single moving line. And the line that moves is the fifth line. And the fifth line of decrease is actually one of the most fortunate lines in the whole of the I Ching. It's talking about being fortunate, not just fortunate, but you are destined for good fortune. This is your moment. So there is something that can work out incredibly well for you. And you've done the right things, and fate has marked you out. And I'm always worried about saying this kind of thing because I don't want to create false hope. I mean, that is the problem with the I Ching and any other form of oracle. You feel this pressure to make people feel good about themselves, to think everything's going to be wonderful, and in the end it turns out to be pretty much of a damp squib. So I'm just saying, don't get your hopes up just because in theory it's going to be a great day, or it can be a great day, doesn't mean to say it will be. And also you have to think, what does good fortune mean? It's tempting to see good fortune in terms of money, success, status, but there are many different ways in which you can be fortunate. And you can be fortunate in terms of being part of something, having awareness, and also it can be about one's perception. It's so easy to think that one is in a miserable situation, that one has made mistakes and there's nothing one can do about it. And perhaps part of good fortune is actually recognizing what we have. But still, there is this implication here that something is coming our way. And if good fortune comes knocking on the door, we shouldn't reject it. We shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. So if you see an opportunity, it comes your way, perhaps comes your way from nowhere. Don't ask questions. Looking at what is it? I don't really know about horses, but I think the phrase looking a gift horse in the mouth means that if someone gives you a horse as a gift, you shouldn't just spend all your time looking at its teeth to see how old it is, or try to be critical about the horse. That's not what it's about. So if good fortune comes your way, don't be too analytical about it, saying, "Oh, is this a trap? Is it going to work? Is it as good as it sounds on the surface?" No, it's an opportunity. And with this fifth line moving, that means that we move to hexagram number 61, which is inner truth. And in the end, we understand the truth of the matter. And it, again, another good hexagram. There are things going on, as I've been talking about in this video. Sun moving into Aquarius, for example. The Sun in Aquarius perhaps is about the truth and being objective, and we see things for what they really are, and at the same time we have an opportunity to transmit the truth. So if we believe something to be the case, then we can speak with authority. People will listen to us, even people who don't normally listen to us, people who are quite stubborn and they're completely set in their ways. So don't underestimate yourself in terms of how you can communicate and what you can say, because I think that people will listen. And maybe this is all part of what I was saying in the previous hexagram. Decrease perhaps means letting go of something. I mean, going back to decrease, if you look at the structure of the hexagram, the bottom three lines represent the lake. The top three lines could be the mountain, but it could be matter. And so it could be sort of solid particles or whatever evaporating somehow off the lake and apparently going nowhere. But they're not going nowhere, they're going somewhere. And going back to inner truth, that may be about what we are transmitting. And so if we're feeling good about ourselves, if we're feeling fortunate, it's quite possible that we can transmit this good fortune. So it's not just our good fortune; it could be other people's as well, if we're able to transmit the right message. And now I want to talk about the Sun in Aquarius. Then I want to talk about Donald Trump. Last part of the video could be somewhat chaotic, and it's not just the Sun in Aquarius I want to talk about. It's it's also the fact that we do have all these planets moving into Aquarius, and what actually does it mean? And of course, I've given this hexagram, this video, the title of Brutal Freedom. And sure, there is a brutality to Sun in Aquarius. I don't think that can be denied. I mean, so here is the moment that the Sun moves into Aquarius. Here it is, 1:45 a.m. London time. And so the Sun in Aquarius is a sign that is ruled by Saturn. And I know some of you deny that. You think that Aquarius rules Aquarius, but it is Saturn. And so, the Sun is moving from one Saturn-ruled sign to another. But there is a difference between Capricorn and Aquarius. Capricorn is sort of negative Saturn, and Aquarius is positive Saturn. And as I was saying yesterday, it's different kinds of control. Saturn in Capricorn wants to be in control, wants some structure, but in quite a passive way, and it's quite traditional maybe. Whereas Saturn in Aquarius, the Aquarius side of Saturn, is about wanting active control, wanting to actually introduce new things in order to control. Technology, for example, monitoring people's phone calls, cameras, whatever it takes to be the one in control. I mean, I know that in Britain, the government has just dropped the idea of digital ID cards, but digital ID cards, everything, anything digital, anything where you can monitor what people are doing. For example, central bank digital currency, so you can watch how people spend their money. This is all the Saturn side of Aquarius, and it's I don't think a coincidence that Nazi Germany, a reputation for being the most totalitarian society ever, pretty much, came into being on January the 30th, 1933, when the Sun and Saturn were in Aquarius. I'm not saying it's that bad, but this is certainly an aspect of what it's all about. And we also have Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto's been in Aquarius for some time. But so what's going on is that as planets move from Capricorn to Aquarius, they clip Pluto. For example, today we've got Venus conjunct Pluto. In a few days' time, the Sun and Mercury will conjunct Pluto. Then Mars will conjunct Pluto. So Pluto is this energy in Aquarius that's just sitting there. It's quite a collective energy. And I think that in the end, Pluto in Aquarius is going to be about the power of technology. It's going to be about control. It's also about the need for freedom, the desire for freedom. So this is a real contradiction with Aquarius. On one hand, you want to be in control. Governments want to be in control. On the other hand, people want their freedom, and it can kind of work both ways. You get your freedom, but then what? So I don't know. You look at the American Revolution. It's true that the colonists got their freedom, and having got their freedom, they wanted to create a state, and that state wanted to an extent, control people's lives. It wanted to tax them, and it created a system of government that was really very effective. So there are two sides to it. Or, with Pluto in Aquarius. Well, Pluto was in Aquarius during the time of the French Revolution. So the French Revolution, storming of the Bastille, that's great. The people have overthrown the monarch, or at least limit the monarch's power. But then you have Robespierre, and you have real year zero. You change the calendar, you change the number system. Everything gets changed, and you have the terror, the Great Terror, when everyone was being guillotined, including Robespierre himself. So that is the two sides of Aquarius. So Aquarius is a very dangerous sign. So the people offering you freedom could in the end be the people who take it away, who destroy it. And so that is a real issue, and people are feeling it all the time now with Pluto in Aquarius now. I mean, in America, I must make it clear, I'm not expressing any opinions here, but some people who are progressive are very upset about what ICE are doing, for example, in the streets of Minneapolis, attack in other places, taking people off the streets, arresting people, smashing into people's cars. There's always a counter argument, but I'm not expressing an opinion here. I could, but I don't think that would be the right thing to do. And of course, you've got in Europe, Pluto in Aquarius. People are trying to control what people do in social media. On social media, they're talking about how many people get arrested in the UK for what they write on social media. This is all Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius. But now planets are clipping that Pluto, and so all of those personal planets, as they move into Aquarius, as they make that conjunction to Pluto, are really giving us a feel about what Aquarius is about. And it might be year zero. Maybe it is a brave new world, and additionally, with this Aquarian emphasis, and particularly these planets in early Aquarius, I'm reminded of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So not so long ago, there was a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn. And this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was on December the 21st, 2020. Now, this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was at 0 degrees 29 Aquarius. So what's happening is, this Jupiter-Saturn is reminding us of this kind of Aquarian period that we're about to go through. Pluto was at the time getting ready to move into Aquarius, but now we've got all of these planets as they move into Aquarius, like today, Sun moving into Aquarius, Mercury moving into Aquarius. They're aspecting that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the end of 2020 at 0 degrees 29 Aquarius. They're really triggering it. So the power of that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is really now starting to manifest. Now, I've got my views on this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I said I wrote in 2020 that my interpretation of it, my prime interpretation of it, related to Russia, and I believe that Russia was really going to be in the forefront. I thought it was really good for Russia, so it might be that these planets hitting the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction say something about Russia, but they also probably say something about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in general in Aquarius. I mean, this chart is set for the UK, so I don't know. I mean, it may be that these planets, as they move into Aquarius, are going to hit the UK, particularly in a way that is, particularly powerful. So that's why I think, from a collective point of view, these planets in early Aquarius hitting Pluto, they just trigger the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And I don't think we've completely been aware of the power of that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Okay, that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction took place in the midst of COVID, when that was in a way a very quite Aquarian experience. Governments wanting to be in control of people's movements and vaccinations, and that's another issue I really don't want to express an opinion on. I was vaccinated a lot. I didn't mind being vaccinated, but that's I quite like being vaccinated, but that's just me. So don't forget that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And then there is the question of America and Trump and Greenland. So let's start off by looking at the United States' chart. So one thing about the United States is that it has Pluto at 27 degrees 33 Capricorn. So recently, the United States had its Pluto return, and if you're a country that's been going on for the best part of 250 years, your Pluto matters. So when something aspects the Pluto, I think that could say something about the country and what's going on in the country. And if we look at the aspects to that Pluto right now, we certainly see something important. So, here's the precise moment that the Sun moves into Aquarius. But what is going on is that, Uranus is currently at 2733 Taurus. Mars is at 2725 Capricorn. So we have Mars trine Uranus at the moment in the sky, and it's hitting the United States' Pluto. So United States' Pluto is being triggered in really a major way. And so when I was looking at the United States' Pluto return, I was kind of thinking that this Pluto return would continue for some years. I use the example of, for example, I use the example of Britain in the 16th century during the reign of Mary I, when you had a sort of counter-reformation, and Mary I, England had been Protestant, and she tried to return England to Catholicism, and that happened, at the time of Britain's Pluto, England's Pluto return, and so it represented a time of big change, big division. In that case, it was, of course, division in terms of religion. Here in the United States, we've got massive division. An example is how people respond to the immigration and the behavior of ICE. It's a very, very divisive issue, and it's not like everyone believes the same thing. You have protests, and you have a completely divided society, and you might say that Mars and Uranus hitting the United States' Pluto, that is about that division, and it's made perhaps more intense by the fact that Uranus is sort of moving backwards. It's moving retrograde, and it's retrograding onto the square of the United States' moon. The moon perhaps is the people, and the people are restless. It's also squaring the United States' black moon, true black moon Lilith. The combined chart doesn't show it, but the United States has an exact moon opposition, true black moon Lilith, and so Uranus is triggering that as well. So you can see the turmoil we've got at the moment. But what else can this mean? And we've got Trump and Greenland. He mentioned Greenland, some years ago, and people thought it was a joke. Now it seems that it's real, and it's easy to think that it's Trump's fantasy and a delusion. Seeing it as on a completely individual level, I would disagree with that. You could regard it. People talk about the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine wanting European powers out of the hemisphere. I think it's like that. Somehow it's called now. The new version is the Donroe Doctrine, wanting Denmark out of the hemisphere. But there's another doctrine or approach, which is sort of manifest destiny. So manifest destiny, again, you probably, if you're American, you probably know more about it than me, but manifest destiny was this idea that it is kind of America's destiny to expand, particularly to expand westwards towards the Pacific Ocean, which is, of course, what he did. But you could argue that manifest destiny is about expansion everywhere, particularly in North America. And so Greenland as becoming part of America, becoming part of the United States, you could argue is part of that manifest destiny. And I also would argue that Trump is linked into this manifest destiny, as I'll be explaining in a moment. And so you could say that with Uranus trine the United States as Pluto, the whole definition of what the United States is all about is being changed. And I believe that if the United States were to take Greenland, that would mean that the United States would overtake Canada as being the country with the second largest land area. I think that's right, because Greenland is so huge. So you've got that shaking things up, and it is about that change and how the country is going to change. And it may also be about Neptune, because I was thinking about the United States' chart and the fact that the United States has got 1 degree 3 Aries on the IC. And so you have got Saturn and Neptune moving onto the United States' IC. And the IC is the land. And you might say that Neptune moving into Aries is perhaps the fantasies about the land, or Saturn as well. But maybe the United States is responding to the insecurity of Saturn and Neptune on its IC by expanding its land. That would, as far as I'm concerned, make sense, would make real sense. And so I think we can see real tensions in the United States' chart, and you could argue that one reason Trump wants to take Greenland is to divert attention from other things, whether it's Epstein or the ice raids or the problems, the internal problems in the United States. Now, that is one way of looking at it, but I'm not convinced. I think it's more fundamental than that. So let's start by looking at Trump's chart, the chart that we know and love. And with Trump's chart, Trump was born with Uranus at 17 Gemini. I think this Uranus at 17 Gemini is becoming very, very important now, and I will now explain. So that Uranus in Gemini, well, that's saying something about, when he was born. I mean, he was born in 1946. And so if we relocate his chart, so for example, if we relocate Trump's chart to Nuuk, which is the capital of Greenland, that Uranus becomes rather closer to the midheaven. I mean, it's pretty close to the midheaven, and if we do an astrocartography for Trump with his so I don't know whether I can use Greenland for here, but let's see if I can find Greenland. Does it include Greenland? Yeah, it does. Yeah, there's Trump's chart set for Greenland. I mean, at least these are the. So I think Nuuk is about sort of around here. So you're set for Greenland. If Uranus is exactly, or it's pretty close to the midheaven near Nuuk, which I believe is the capital of Greenland. So you can understand why Trump might have a certain relationship to Greenland. But you also have to think about, why Trump? It could have been Trump who got obsessed with Greenland. It could have been Clinton. It could have been George Bush Jr. It's one of those three presidents, Clinton, George Bush Jr., or Trump. One of those three presidents had to be interested in Greenland. It actually had to be the case. And so to kind of explain what I mean, so let's look at an article I found on the internet, giving us some of the history. So let's in terms of what let me just. Okay, so here's this article I found. It's by AP, and it's just talking about the history of Greenland, and so it's making it. It says the United States in 1946 proposed to pay Denmark $100 million to buy Greenland after flirting with the idea of swapping oil-rich land in Alaska for strategic parts of a bleak Arctic island, and then it gives some detail. So, in April 1946, State Department official John Hickerson attended a meeting of a planning and strategy committee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and reported that practically every member said that our real objective as regards to Greenland should be to acquire it by purchase from Denmark. And we go on to talk about some of the events. So on June the 20th, 1946, Secretary of War Robert Patterson weighed in, writing to Undersecretary of State Dean Acheson that it might be a good idea to take prompt action towards securing from Denmark, even to the extent of purchasing the entire island if necessary, the military rights which have been outlined by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And it goes on to talk about when it all started, and I think there were talks in November 1945. So right after the Second World War, they were talking about it. And then there's a follow-up memorandum here. In a follow-up to this memorandum, on May the 24th, 1946, William C. Trimble, Assistant Chief of the State Department Division of Northern Europe Affairs, suggested that the United States offer $100 million in gold for the island. So this is kind of what was happening at the time of Trump's birth. So what does all this mean? This is what Trump was born into, because Trump was born in 1946, obviously. So at the time of his birth, and indeed before his birth, I think the discussion started around sort of talk of acquiring Greenland happened around November 1945. So this is what he was born into, and he was picking up on it on some unconscious level. I mean, I do think we should consider what's going on in people before they were born. I think prenatal experiences really do matter, and you might think, well, how can baby Trump have been picking up on these discussions about Greenland? Well, at a collective level, I think he probably was. And so I think that, there were three presidents who were born in 1946, George Bush Jr., Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton. So it could be any one of those three who would be interested in Greenland, or indeed might sort of pick up on something that happened 80 years earlier. So now he's 80 years old, and that memory, that impression that he had when he was born. I know that to some of you this might sound completely crazy, but I think we have to look at the broad picture, and additionally it kind of links with Denmark's horoscope. So this is Trump's chart, and Trump okay, that's Trump's chart. So that's Trump's chart set for Nuke in Greenland with his Uranus at 17 degrees 54 Gemini. And then we look at the horoscope of Denmark. So I think we have a time of birth for Denmark. So Denmark, June the 5th, 1849 at 12:12 p.m. in Kongens Lyngby, sorry about the pronunciation. I think that's pretty close to Copenhagen. So according to this chart, Denmark has its midheaven at 17 degrees 50 Gemini. And so that means that Trump's Uranus is exactly on Denmark's midheaven. it also means that when you had all those discussions about about Denmark becoming part of the United States, 1946, Uranus was on Denmark's midheaven. So there's a sort of a double link there. And so I think that now Trump has, 80 years later, Trump is basically saying that this is time for Denmark to become part of America. And it's not about right or wrong. It just feels so incredibly natural. When you think about the 1940s, a great visionary in the 1940s was, of course, George Orwell. And George Orwell, of course, he wrote 1984, and you could see 1984 as just a novel, a dystopic science fiction novel. But, he was inspired by what was going on at the time. I think he started planning the novel in about 1943, 1944. And what George Orwell perceived was spheres of influence, that he saw the world as being divided up into three parts: Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia. So kind of starting to map on what we have now: the United States, Russia, China. And, you think that George Orwell was a rational writer, but maybe at some level he was a prophet. You see this in other writers like H.G. Wells. There's something quite prophetic about H.G. Wells. But George Orwell was perhaps picking up on something that was going to happen, 80 years, after he was planning 1984. And so from a sphere of influence perspective, it's quite natural, isn't it, that Greenland would eventually become part of America and part of the United States, and it's connected with manifest destiny. And I think I've demonstrated why it might be down to Trump to take Greenland, and it also links with the United States' horoscope, the fact that we've got Uranus is now trine United States' Pluto. And okay, maybe the United States is projecting its own internal problems onto the outer world. But it is year zero, and we've got all these planets moving into Aquarius. It's new. Pluto is in Aquarius. Concepts of international order, global cooperation. All of that is going. And Trump is just kind of realizing how things are actually going to work, and how is it going to end? Oh, I don't know. If we're going back to George Orwell, I was thinking about George Orwell, and of course, Oceania was the country was the Americas, but interestingly, it was also Greenland, it was also Iceland, and it was also the United Kingdom. So I'm just thinking that maybe George Orwell kind of was a prophet. And I was thinking about the UK, and it's kind of neither one thing nor the other. And I wouldn't be surprised if, say, in 50 years' time, when we really go into sort of spheres of influence, that I would not be surprised if the United Kingdom was, and perhaps the British Isles are at some level, part of the United States, along with maybe Greenland and Iceland. I know that sounds far-fetched, but maybe Greenland is just the beginning. But I think that, as far as Trump is concerned, and you think, oh, Trump is just crazy old man, whatever. He's not a crazy old man. You should stop seeing him as a human being. He is reflecting the United States. He is reflecting the United States collective. And, as I said, if it hadn't been Trump, maybe it would have been a different president. But it's so appropriate that he was born in 1946 at the time when, as he was almost at the time of his conception, at the end of 1945, that's when discussions about Greenland started. And so for some reason, he picked up on it. And, maybe the fact that, if you reset his chart for Nuke, Uranus is on the midheaven, and Uranus is, of course, his Uranus is on Denmark's midheaven. It all kind of makes sense. So, you know, I think it's, I think it's kind of obvious that Greenland would go to the United States. The United States will take it. It's not a question of should. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's the way it's going. That's the way the collective is going. And as an astrologer, one shouldn't argue with collective trends. Anyway, maybe you completely disagree with me. So that's those are my thoughts on Greenland and the Sun moving into Aquarius and other planets moving into Aquarius. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.